We used to be the perfect couple. He built software, I designed gardens. But at his company event, he made me the punchline. I smiled, took off my ring, and left him speechless in front of everyone. I design gardens for a living. He builds software that runs on satellites. But at his company's tech conference, he stood in front of 200 people and compared me to a potted plant. So I smiled, walked to the front of the room, and took off my engagement ring in front of his boss. My name is Arden. I'm 31. I run a small but growing business designing sustainable gardens and outdoor spaces for homes and community projects. It's not flashy, it doesn't come with stock options or TED Talks, but it's honest work. It's something I love deeply, and I've built it all on my own from the ground up. I spend my days digging, planting, designing with nature, and I love every second of it. My ex-fiancé, Jace, 33, is a software engineer at a major aerospace company. He's brilliant, ambitious, and looks like he came out of an ad for modern masculinity. Always in pressed shirts, with that too expensive watch, constantly buzzing about some new algorithm or scaling infrastructure. We met at a local nonprofit volunteering event, me helping build a rooftop garden, him coding a donation platform. I liked how different he was from the clients I usually dealt with. He seemed grounded, curious, even fascinated with my work. "You're the most real person I've ever met," he once told me, watching me rip out a patch of weeds. In the beginning, he made me feel seen. He asked questions about soil types, native plants, water conservation. He came to my client sites, helped me haul mulch, even bragged to his friends that I was saving the world one plant at a time. But slowly, something shifted. At first it was subtle, harmless jokes. "I'm dating Mother Earth," he'd say, or "She's got a greener thumb than our server room." I laughed along. I mean, I'm used to people not understanding what I do. It's not glamorous, and most people think landscaping is just mowing lawns. But over time, the jokes started to feel sharper. He started asking me to dress a bit more professionally when meeting his coworkers. He stopped asking about my projects. I'd come home after digging in the sun all day and he'd barely look up from his laptop. "Oh, still playing in the dirt?" he'd mutter, half smiling. It hurt. But I convinced myself it was just stress. He was up for a major promotion, something about leading a new AI integration team. He'd been pulling long nights, constantly in Zoom meetings, and I thought maybe he was just under pressure. Then came the invitation to his company's annual tech conference. It was a big deal. His department was hosting a panel, and he was one of the speakers. He told me, "I really want you there. It'll be great for you to see what I do." I hesitated. I'd never been to one of these things, and just the thought of being surrounded by hundreds of people in tech made my stomach churn. But I said yes. I wanted to be supportive. I mean, this was his world, and I wanted to believe he was still proud to have me in it. The week before the event, he started getting intense, picking my outfit, coaching me on how to talk about my work. "Just say you run a small design business," he said. "Don't get into the weeds, no pun intended." I should have known right then. The day of the conference, I wore a sage green blouse and a skirt I'd only ever worn to weddings. I curled my hair, wore makeup, and put on the necklace Jace gave me last Christmas. He didn't say I looked nice, just handed me a lanyard with guest printed in bold red font and rushed me into a sea of gray suits and blinking lanyards. I tried to blend in. I smiled, shook hands, nodded along as people talked about machine learning pipelines and autonomous frameworks. I understood maybe 10% of what anyone was saying. Jace was in his element, commanding conversations, tossing out jargon like candy. He looked so alive. I watched him from across the room, sipping my tiny coffee, and I felt proud. Nervous, but proud. That didn't last long. He started introducing me to people, and every introduction chipped away at me. "This is my fiancée Arden. She's kind of a plant whisperer. Arden makes gardens look pretty. She's like a floral UX designer. Yeah, she works with dirt, but it's the eco kind, so it's cool." I laughed softly at first, tried to be the supportive partner, but the laughter started feeling hollow, then painful. One woman, a manager in his department, smiled at me and said, "Oh wow, that must be so relaxing. It's like a hobby, right?" Before I could answer, Jace jumped in. "Exactly. She's like a Zen gardener, but with invoices." They laughed. I didn't. Later, during the panel, Jace was on stage talking about AI's role in human efficiency. He was articulate, funny, confident, until someone asked about how he stays grounded with all the tech chaos. And he said it. He chuckled and said, "Well, I go home to a woman who talks to ferns. Arden's great. She keeps me in touch with the analog world. If I ever get too in my head, she's there with a trowel and compost to remind me that sometimes all you need is sunlight and water." The audience laughed, loudly. He smiled at me from the stage, like he'd just given me a compliment. My cheeks burned, my hands clenched. That wasn't sweet. That was patronizing. That was him turning me into a punchline. I stood up. I heard the whispers, felt the eyes on me. But I didn't care. I walked straight down the side aisle toward the front of the stage. Jace looked confused, then alarmed. I reached into my bag, pulled out the small velvet box with the ring I'd taken off before we walked in, and in front of his coworkers, his team, and his boss sitting 3 rows back, I placed the ring on the edge of the stage, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "If you ever need someone to water your ego again, don't call me." And then I turned around and walked straight out of the room. When I walked out of that room, I didn't cry. Not right away. I made it to the parking lot, pulled open the door of my old Subaru, and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding me together. I could still hear the echoes of their laughter in my head. The sound of Jace's smug voice, calling me the woman who talks to ferns. The smile he gave me after he humiliated me in front of hundreds of people, like he expected me to be flattered. I stared straight ahead for a long time. I didn't even start the car. Then the first tear hit my hand. It wasn't just about the speech, or the joke. It was everything underneath it. 4 years of slowly being made to feel like I was less than. Like what I did didn't count. Like I was someone to be tolerated, displayed, diminished. I had worked so damn hard to build something meaningful. My clients respected me. My community valued what I did. Kids in the neighborhood called me the flower lady and asked me about sunflowers. But Jace wanted me to be small, quiet, polished in a way that didn't scare his coworkers. I thought about the early days when he'd show up to my job sites with lunch and say how proud he was of me. I should have known when that turned into him bringing a protein bar and telling me I really should start marketing myself better. After about 30 minutes of sitting there, phone buzzing in my purse, I finally started the engine and drove. Not home. I couldn't go back there yet. It didn't feel like mine anymore. I ended up at my sister's place. She opened the door and took one look at my face before pulling me into a hug. No questions, no judgment, just warmth. The kind I hadn't felt in a long time. That night, we sat on the back porch with tea while I told her everything, every comment, every joke, the slow erasure of my self-worth. She listened, tight-lipped, until I got to the part about the conference. "Please tell me you didn't actually leave the ring on the stage," she whispered. "I did," I said, my voice shaking. "Right in front of his boss." She laughed, a sharp, proud sound. "Good." I slept like a rock that night. Not because I was okay, but because my body was exhausted from holding everything in for too long. The next morning, I woke up to a storm of texts from Jace. "Where are you? We need to talk. I think you overreacted. Seriously, you embarrassed me in front of my entire team." There it was. No apology. Just more of the same. Like I was the problem for not being able to take a joke. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, but because I had too many, and none of them were polite. Instead, I took a shower, put on my work boots, and drove to my next client's house. A retired teacher named Mrs. Langford who wanted a butterfly garden planted for her grandkids. I spent the whole morning in the dirt, letting the soil and sun scrape away some of the pain. It wasn't until 3 days later that the real twist hit. I got a message on Instagram from a woman I didn't recognize. Her profile was private, no bio. The message just said, "You don't know me, but I know Jace. I think you deserve to know the truth." My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen for a full minute before replying. "What truth?" She responded with a paragraph that turned my blood cold. She told me her name was Rena, and that she worked with Jace on a project 6 months ago. They'd gotten close. Too close. He never said he was engaged. She only found out after seeing a tagged photo of us at a mutual acquaintance's wedding. "I confronted him," she wrote. "He said you weren't serious, that you were just someone he was helping through a phase." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. The humiliation at the conference, the jokes, the way he spoke about me like I was a charity project, it wasn't just disrespect, it was premeditated. He never respected me. He just thought I'd be grateful enough to stay quiet while he built his perfect little tech god narrative. Rena sent screenshots, texts from Jace, messages where he called me sweet but simple, where he said I didn't really understand ambition. One even said, "She plays in gardens. She's not going anywhere." He was so sure, so arrogant, so cruel. And now I was done. Not just with him, but with feeling small. I went back to my apartment, grabbed everything he'd ever given me, from the watch he upgraded me with, to the book on startups he claimed would help me think bigger, and tossed them in a box. Then I changed the locks. When he showed up 2 days later, all smug charm and fake concern, I didn't even open the door. He pounded on it for 5 solid minutes, yelling about how I was ruining his career by making a scene. Said I was spiteful and hysterical and turning people against him. I didn't say a word. I just stood behind the door, holding that box of receipts, both literal and emotional, and knew I had something he'd never understand. Integrity. And I hadn't even told him yet that Rena wasn't the only one, because that's when I found the second message, from someone even closer to him, The second message hit different. It came in the middle of the night, 2:14 a.m. to be exact. I wasn't asleep. I hadn't really slept since everything exploded. My phone buzzed once. I expected another, "We need to talk," from Jace. But it wasn't him. It was from Camden, Jace's best friend since college. His ride or die, the guy who gave the toast at our engagement party, who once said I was the calm to Jace's chaos. The message said, "I'm sorry it took me this long to say something. I didn't know how, but I can't watch him keep lying to you." I just stared at it. My hands went cold. My stomach twisted. Because if Camden, of all people, was reaching out, this wasn't just about the conference or even Rena. This was something deeper. I replied, "What's going on?" He responded instantly. "You deserve to know the truth about the trip to Austin 2 years ago, the startup pitch weekend." He wasn't alone. I froze. That trip, I remembered it. Jace had flown to Austin for a last-minute accelerator pitch session, said it was important, said he'd be too busy for calls. I had offered to go just to support him. He brushed it off and said, "It's nothing exciting, Arden, just code and Red Bulls." He was gone 3 days, and when he came back, he was different, distant. He picked fights about stupid things like why I left garden gloves in the kitchen or why I didn't try harder with his coworkers at brunch. I chalked it up to stress, startup stuff. But now, Camden was saying he wasn't alone. He brought someone with him, Camden continued. Her name was Steph, from his old job. He introduced her as a colleague, but they shared a room. I thought you knew. I assumed you talked about it. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. 2 years, 2 whole years. I'd been sleeping next to someone who carried that secret like it was nothing. Someone who mocked my passion, who minimized me in front of strangers, who acted like I was the one being insecure. All while hiding that he'd slept with someone during a business trip and never told me. I asked Camden why he was coming forward now. He told me he didn't agree with what Jace did at the conference, that the way Jace treated me had gone too far, that when he saw the video clip floating around the tech group chats, he felt sick to his stomach. He used to talk about you like you were everything, Camden said. Then somewhere along the way, he started acting like you were just temporary. That word burned. Temporary. Like I was filler, like I was just there until something shinier came along. I thanked Camden for telling me. Even though the truth shattered something in me, I was glad to finally see it clearly. But I wasn't done, because if Jace had lied about Steph, what else was hiding under all that charm and polished confidence? I didn't have to wait long to find out. The next morning, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "Hi, you don't know me, but I know who you are. I was one of Jace's mentors at work. We had a situation last year. If you're open to it, I think we should talk." Mentor? Female mentor? My heart was pounding as I called the number. Her voice was calm, older, maybe in her 40s. She introduced herself as Elise, a senior project lead who'd been Jace's direct manager during a major launch project. She didn't waste time. She said that last year she'd invited Jace to a leadership retreat with several key people from the company. It was supposed to be a professional event. But Jace blurred the line. He flirted, aggressively, she said. I shut it down, told him it was inappropriate. But a few days later, he started spreading rumors that we'd hooked up. I sat there in complete silence. Elise said she'd never told HR, afraid it would come back on her. But when she heard about what happened at the conference and how I walked out, she decided enough was enough. You deserve better than him, she said. I should have said something sooner. I thanked her. But my voice was shaking. Because this wasn't just one mistake, or one affair, or even one cruel joke. This was a pattern. Jace didn't just disrespect me. He used me. He played the role of humble genius, dating the earthy gardener, to look grounded, to seem balanced. While he chased women behind my back and stepped on my name to climb corporate stairs, and I had let it happen for 4 years because I believed in the version of him he showed me. That night, I sat on my porch with a notebook in my lap, trying to write down every red flag I had ignored. When he called me quirky for composting. When he introduced me as the gardener girl to his college friends. When he joked that I was low maintenance, like succulents. When he rolled his eyes every time I talked about native plants and bees. When he told me I was lucky, he understood my little business. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I closed the notebook, walked inside, and did the one thing I knew would get under his skin more than any confrontation. I opened my laptop, logged into my business account, and changed the name of my company. From Arden's Gardens to Rooted and Rising. And in the description, founded by someone who was once treated like a decorative plant. Now I grow on my own terms. The next morning, Jace showed up at my door again. I didn't open it, but this time, he didn't knock. He just stood there, staring through the glass. And that's when I noticed he wasn't alone. Right behind him was Steph. I stood frozen just behind the curtain. Jace was on my porch, and Steph the woman from the Austin trip, the woman I now knew he slept with 2 years ago, was standing right next to him. They weren't holding hands, but they didn't need to. She was wearing his hoodie, the same one I used to wear on cold mornings when I made him coffee before his meetings. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't move, didn't speak. I just watched them through the glass like I was seeing ghosts in daylight. He had the audacity to raise his hand and knock, like he hadn't publicly humiliated me, cheated on me, and then spun the narrative like I was the unstable one for walking away. I didn't answer. I waited. They stood there for a minute, maybe two, before he finally pulled out his phone and started typing. I knew the message was for me. But I didn't even look when it buzzed, because I had a better idea. I didn't want closure, I wanted truth. And if they were going to show up at my home, on my turf, after everything he did, then I was going to give them what they came for, but on my terms. I waited until they left. Then I opened the text. "You're making this way harder than it has to be. Can we please just talk like adults? Steph's here to support me, not to rub anything in your face. You're being dramatic, Arden. You always are." Support? He brought the woman he cheated with to my door and wanted me to believe she was just moral support? I nearly laughed. But I wasn't going to let him get to me, not this time. So I got to work. Over the next week, I focused on building something real, not petty revenge, not drama, a legacy. I reached out to 3 of my longest-standing clients, families, small businesses, people who'd supported me from the beginning, and asked if I could feature their gardens in a new project I was building. A visual portfolio and blog focused on sustainable spaces, outdoor healing, and reclaiming your life, starting with your own backyard. The name? Rooted and Rising. The same name I gave my business the night I found out the truth. But here's where it gets interesting. Jace loved being seen as a visionary. He lived for LinkedIn clout, tech articles, panels. That conference he dragged me to? He only got that spot because of his personal brand, so I used his language against him. In my blog's launch post, I wrote, "A year ago, I was building herb gardens and getting called cute by people who wouldn't know a tomato vine from a charging cable. I was engaged to a man who saw me as a background feature in his perfect tech world life. Until one day, he joked about me in front of 200 people, and I realized he never saw me as an equal, only a mascot for humility he never actually had. I didn't name him. I didn't have to. People knew. And apparently, someone at his company shared it internally. Because 2 days after I posted, my site got a spike in traffic. Dozens of new visitors. Several came from the exact IP range of Jace's office location. Thank you, anonymous tech allies. But it gets better. One of the blog's readers reached out. Her name was May, a junior software developer at Jace's company. She said she'd been at the conference, the one where Jace made me the punchline, and she'd felt sick watching it happen. "It reminded me of how my ex used to treat me," she wrote. "Your story hit way too close to home, but the way you walked out, that was powerful." We got to talking. One message turned into a phone call. That call turned into a plan. May told me Jace had been trying to pitch a new AI-powered sustainability project to the board, a program that allegedly helped people visualize eco-conscious design using augmented reality. Sound familiar? It should, because he'd pitched that exact idea to me last year, saying we could work on it together. I'd spent nights sketching concepts, listing tools, mapping plant growth overlays for him. I still had the damn napkin drawings. Turns out he took it, erased my name, and started calling it his side passion. May was furious, and she had access. She offered to leak one of his early slide decks from the internal archive, and there it was, a full mock-up of my garden layouts, presented under his name. He didn't just cheat on me. He didn't just humiliate me. He stole my work, and that was the final straw. I wasn't going to file a lawsuit. I wasn't going to cause a public scandal. I was going to expose the truth, creatively. So I recorded a video. Simple. No drama. Just me in my work boots, walking through one of my oldest garden designs, pointing out the elements I created. The same ones from Jace's deck. Then I added, "Funny how the same man who called me a plant whisperer in front of his colleagues later pitched these ideas as his own, all while claiming I was just someone who played in the dirt." I ended the video with a smile and this line: "You can take a woman's work, her words, her light, but you can't stop her from planting herself somewhere new and blooming anyway." I posted it to my blog. Then I quietly shared the link in a sustainability forum where Jace's company frequently recruits talent. It took less than 24 hours. One of the forum moderators flagged it. Then someone forwarded it to the board. And that's when the real fallout began, because the next day I got a message from Camden again. "He's losing it," he wrote. "They pulled his project. He's under review. Steph walked out on him. Said he manipulated her too." I stared at my screen. Not with joy, not with revenge, but with relief. He finally did it to the wrong person. And it wasn't me this time. By the time the board launched the investigation, I had already moved on. Not moved on like healing on a beach or journaling under fairy lights. I mean, really moved on. I was booked solid with new clients. People who found my blog, who connected with my story, who saw value in what I built. Not in spite of the dirt under my nails, but because of it. I was teaching weekend workshops, collaborating with a local nonprofit, and finally breathing again. But Jace, he was unraveling. Camden kept me updated, not out of gossip, but because he thought I deserved to know how it all played out. According to him, the company's legal department was deeply concerned about the overlapping IP between my blog, my documented sketches, and the prototype Jace had presented internally. His team turned on him. Apparently, once the board started digging, people began coming forward, more than just May. There were interns who said Jace borrowed ideas, a junior developer he took credit from. Even Elise, his former manager, had finally filed an official report about his behavior at the leadership retreat. They didn't fire him outright, but they froze everything. No more pitch funding, no promotion, no panel appearances, no fancy write-up in Tech Founders Monthly like he'd been banking on. He tried to salvage it, of course. Went full spin mode, posting vague LinkedIn updates about navigating transitions and taking accountability. But people weren't buying it, because the internet never forgets, and neither does the truth. The last message I ever got from Jace came a month later. It said, "I hope you're proud of yourself. You ruined my career just because you couldn't take a joke." I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied, "No, Jace. You ruined your own career. I just stopped covering for you." Blocked. Deleted. Done. Not long after, Steph emailed me. I debated whether to open it, but I did. She apologized. She said she didn't know about me when the Austin trip happened. That Jace told her I was an old girlfriend he was still helping out financially. She found out the truth after they got back, confronted him, and he convinced her I was unstable and obsessed with gardening because I lacked ambition. Her words. She said he manipulated her, gaslit her. And when she finally left, he called her just another dirt girl. I almost laughed. Turns out, he didn't just hate women like me. He feared us. Feared what it meant to love someone who didn't need his approval to grow. But the part that hit the hardest? She said, "You walking out on him showed me I could too." That stuck with me. Because maybe that was the point of all this. Not to take him down, but to stand up so someone else could too. The last time I saw Jace, he was standing outside a networking event I had been invited to speak at, ironically, about sustainable leadership in business. He didn't see me, but I saw him, and I saw something else too. He looked small. Not physically, but internally, like a man realizing that charm, wit, and manipulation only get you so far before people catch on, before the mask slips, before you're just a guy with a trail of broken trust and no one left to blame but yourself. I didn't wave. I didn't nod. I walked past him, head high, steps steady, and for the first time in years, I felt untouchable. Because he could take my time, my energy, my sketches, my kindness, but not my worth. He never owned that, and he never will. Some people plant roots in you just so they can pull them out when they leave. But others, like me, we learn to replant ourselves somewhere stronger, somewhere we won't be ripped up again. The biggest lesson I learned? If someone needs to shrink you to feel bigger, they were never standing beside you to begin with. And if you keep feeling disrespected, it's probably because you are, and always have been. Have you ever ignored a red flag because you believed in someone too much? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, consider subscribing. There's more to come, and you're not alone.